On Ruffing the Passer show talks football, miscellaneous stuff, and mostly football. I'm your host, Sam Ruffing, and this is episode 97, and boy, the pollen is killing me this spring. I mean, just green clouds everywhere, lots of sneezing. All in all, not fun. But the show must go on, and in today's episode, I will be discussing the Bills' plan after moving on from Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis in free agency, and how the Raiders have won the Darren Waller trade, and why somehow Josh McDaniels has made what seems to be two terrible decisions in his time with the Broncos and Raiders that have somehow worked out after he was gone. But starting off the episode, I want to talk about Justin Jefferson. This is a little late analysis on it, but he signed a extension with the Minnesota Vikings worth $140 million over 4 years, with $120 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid receiver in the NFL for now. This is obviously well deserved. He's easily the best receiver in the NFL. I mean, same and Tyreek currently. I'd give the edge to Justin Jefferson in terms of receiving stats and play, but you can make the argument for either one. This was totally worth it. The Minnesota Vikings needed to keep him around. I mean, just to help develop J.J. McCarthy, give him a nice receiver, a go-to weapon to alongside, Jordan Addison and T.J. Hawkinson. Overall, it's looking really good in Minnesota for developing a young rookie with their head coach. Can't remember his name right now. And Justin Jefferson, J.J. McCarthy, T.J. Hawkinson, and Jordan Addison. However, may I just say, $30 million a year at receiver. $30 million. If only I could have, had good hands and run a 4.4 and were as agile as Justin Jefferson, I'd be making $30 million a year right now. Crazy. Now, I do think this deal in particular is worth it just because of developing J.J. McCarthy. You just want to make sure he has a good receiver so he has confidence going into his first season. You don't want to end up with a Mac Jones type situation where you give him weapons year one, he looks great, but then you don't give him any more weapons after that, and his confidence is shot, and he completely falls apart after that because he had no weapons. So I like the Minnesota Vikings move here. But overall, I have to ask the question, are receivers a little too overvalued? I think the short answer is no. I don't think they're necessarily overvalued. The long answer is a bit complicated. I mainly bring this up because over the last, let's say 30 years of football, we've seen tons of top receivers in the NFL have tons of yards, make tons of money, put up crazy stats, a lot of touchdowns, yet they never seem to be on a winning team or get that Super Bowl, Like, having the best receiver does not always equate to having the most championships. Or at least having a top receiver does not always equate to championships. I mean, just look at the past. We had Terrell Owens, who was one of the best receivers in the NFL for like a decade. He obviously played on some great teams, Dallas, Philly, San Francisco. He actually made the Super Bowl with Philly, but he never won a Super Bowl. Guys like Chad Johnson never won a Super Bowl. Andre Johnson never won a Super Bowl. Randy Moss never won a Super Bowl. And these guys were the best of their crop, cream of the crop, in their era. And yet they never somehow won a Super Bowl. I mean, even in today's NFL, you see guys like Tyreek Hill making $30 million or all close to $30 million a year, Devontae Adams making close to $30 million a year, and they haven't made Super Bowls. I mean, Tyreek Hill won a Super Bowl, but that was back when he had Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. He wasn't exactly a top receiver. He did make a big play in the game, but I'm just saying. It just seems like the top receivers who make the most money never seem to get the Super Bowl, and I find it very strange until you really look into it. Think about it for a second. Receiver is one of the most reliant positions in the NFL. I mean, by reliant, I mean, what they have to rely on for them to work, for them to, produce. Here's an example. Here's what a quarterback needs to needs to have happen for him to play, for him to, be in control and play well. He needs to have an O-line that can snap the ball to him and protect him. Obviously, he needs open receivers, and he needs a run game maybe. But I mean, he can look receivers open. He can throw receivers open. If he's good enough, he'll find an open receiver. Stuff like that. He only relies on two things: a good O-line and one who snaps him the ball. Running back, they rely on a good O-line, the O-line snapping the ball to the quarterback, and the quarterback handing the ball off to them. From there, they just run and, trying to gain some yards. And it's not even like they need a great O-line. If you're a good enough running back, sometimes you can just make magic happen and break free. So it's not like you necessarily need the greatest O-line if you're a running back. If you're a receiver, however, what you have to rely on is, one, the O-line snapping the ball to the quarterback. Two, the O-line protecting the quarterback. Three, the quarterback looking your direction. Four, the quarterback making the throw. That is more things they have to have go right for them than the than quarterbacks and running backs. And it's not their fault. There's just nothing they can do to control that. I mean, they can be as wide open as possible, but if the quarterback's sacked, he can't do anything. And so, you have guys like Terrell Owens or Chad Johnson or Andre Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, who have been great receivers for a long time, yet they never really have playoff success because the teams around him, well, I mean, they can only go as far as the teams around him because the teams around him have to play well for them to play well, to get the ball and produce and whatnot. Also, another thing I noticed is stat-wise, let's just say the percentage of stats taken up by a receiver. Say a receiver goes off for 150 yards and the quarterback throws for 300. The receiver only accounts for, 150 yards of those 300 passing yards, and say the running back runs for 60. That's only 360 total yards of offense. The receiver isn't adding on top of the quarterback's passing numbers. It just is part of the quarterback's passing numbers. The running back, let's just say on the other hand, rushes for 120 yards and the quarterback throws for 260. That's 380 yards total, plus the running back on the ground, draining clock, wearing out the defense, O-line against D-line, stuff like that. When you pay a receiver a ton of money, I'm sorry, I just sound so so analytical, thought out. It's just very strange to me. When you pay a receiver a lot of money, like $30 million, you are putting a big investment into that position to produce like crazy, 1,200 yards, 1,300 yards, and maybe 10 to 15 touchdowns. But if you were to take that $30 million you're spending on Tyreek Hill, on your Cooper Kupps, on your Justin Jeffersons, on your Jamar Chases, which he'll probably get when he commands a new deal, same with CD Lamb, that's $30 million you could be putting into other positions that you're putting into one position group. You could pay a receiver $30 million, or you could sign two high-priced $15 million a year linebackers. They'll be very good. Not necessarily great linebackers, but very good. Or you can pay $15 million a year to two really good guards. Maybe even great guards. You could pay $20 million of that to an offensive tackle who will protect your blind side, and you could pay $10 million of that to a solid running back. Or you can take that $30 million a year, split it up into $10 million each, and give it to three solid wide receivers, or two solid wide receivers and a tight end. All I'm saying is when you put a lot of money into one position, they better be like the top of the game, your Randy Mosses, your Jerry Rices, to perform. Otherwise, you're just wasting money in other positions. It's like when you pay a quarterback a ton of money in today's NFL. Like, he better be Patrick Mahomes level good, or Tom Brady. Well, not even Tom Brady couldn't win while being paid the most. Peyton Manning level good. Because you're taking money that could go to depth across the roster, like linebackers, pass rushers, wide receivers, etc. Now, obviously, this isn't one for one here. We have seen the past couple of years that top receivers have won Super Bowls. I mean, just look at the LA Rams. Cooper Kupp was the best receiver in 2021 in pretty much every category. He won the Super Bowl, named Super Bowl MVP. 2020, Tom Brady had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown on Tampa, and they won the Super Bowl. The year before that, the Kansas City Chiefs had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So, it's not exactly one for one. However, I do think it's also interesting that when the Chiefs got rid of Tyreek Hill, instead of paying him, the exorbitant amount, they took that money that they saved and spent it on other positions, like the O-lineman, Orlando Brown Jr. from the Ravens. They spent it on him. They took that draft capital and helped fill out the roster. They signed guys like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who have been huge in the playoffs, and they relied on run game and Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes and Isaiah Pacheco, and beat a team in the Eagles who had great receiving talent in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and whatever his name is, Dallas Goedert, and beat them, although that could have also been due to a certain holding penalty. Beyond that, however, and then the next year they beat the San Francisco 49ers, who have better receiving talent than them, much better than them, with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he's a running back, but he also acts as a receiver. They beat them with only Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, and a good O-line. The Chiefs moved off of Tyreek Hill, decided not to pay him that big amount, and put it into the rest of the team. Now, I understand why the Vikings did this. They definitely need to make sure J.J. McCarthy stays upright. I mean, J.J. McCarthy has a wide open receiver, a great receiver, so he can just develop, become a good passer, get some confidence, so that, he can be your franchise guy. However, if the time comes later, you need a few more pieces on the O-line, the D-line. J.J. McCarthy's already fully developed into a great quarterback, and you have Jordan Addison, maybe another receiver, T.J. Hawkinson. It might be time to move. It would probably be wise to look to move on from Justin Jefferson, give him to an established contender who already has the money. I'm just saying. I don't think receivers are necessarily overpaid because they do offer great value, such as Cooper Kupp or Tyreek Hill with the Chiefs run, or Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. However, there are times when paying too much money for a position like receiver, who is one of the most reliant players in all of football, you might want to reconsider sometimes. Like, should I pay the receiver or just trade him and get a whole bunch of draft picks? So the short answer is no, receiver's not overvalued. The long answer, no, but maybe. Well, that's just my thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments below what you think about whether or not receivers are overpaid. Moving on, the Buffalo Bills had a interesting free agency that I'd like to touch on. They moved on from Stephon Diggs in a rather smart move, I'd say. I mean, he was a locker room problem. Last year, he was calling out the team. It seemed like he wanted to get out, and he wasn't helping them go anywhere. So moving on from him, trading to the Houston Texans, I think was good. Other moves the Bills made this offseason have left people scratching their heads as to what are they doing exactly. Not only did they move on from Stephon Diggs, they also moved on from Gabe Davis, which I thought was a bit weird. Big game Gabe could step up in that number one role. He catches touchdowns when you need him. Move on from Stephon. He seems like a better team player. Thought it was a bit strange. What's even weirder is that they did not really look to replace him in free agency at all either. I mean, they drafted Keon Coleman in the second round. But that draft pick, they traded back with the Chiefs. And the Chiefs took Xavier Worthy. Why didn't the Bills take Xavier Worthy, I'm wondering. It's a bit strange. So they went from, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and Dalton Kincaid to Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, who's a very good slot receiver, very good receiver, but not, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and Keon Coleman. Oh, and Chase Claypool. I forgot about that. They did sign Chase Claypool. That'll make everything better. No, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, it's a very strange move. And the Bills have said that they want to make sure they don't end up like the Rams, so they're moving on from old players, cutting people, saving salary cap, like Tre'Davious White, who had a second Achilles injury. They cut him. Von Miller, they made restructure his deal, take a team-friendly deal so he could stick around, and moves like that. But I think the ulterior motive to the Bills' plan here is to become less one-dimensional. I mean, just think back to the Bills the last few years. What has been their biggest problem on offense? One-dimensionality. Is that a word, one-dimensionality? They're too one-dimensional. I mean, their last few playoff losses have gone like this. Against the Chiefs in 2021, Josh Allen threw for a ton of yards, ton of touchdowns, and the defense let them down. The year after that, the defense let them down, allowed a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns, a lot of points to the Bengals, and Josh Allen couldn't keep up and win. This last year, the defense played pretty well, but then they called upon Josh Allen to win the game, throw for the end zone from the 27-yard line, even though there was a minute and a half left on the clock, and it was 2nd and 9. And they were only down 3. You noticing a trend here? They're very Josh Allen reliant. They are Josh Allen reliant here. Too much so. And I think what the Bills are trying to do is become less Josh Allen reliant. Josh Allen reliant. And I think it makes all the sense in the world, honestly. I mean, don't get me wrong, Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That is undisputed. That is one of the... no one is questioning that. However, football is a team game. You can't rely on one person to save your team, to be your total offense, to do everything. Even a quarterback who, is the main one who runs the offense, he can't do everything. And over the years, that's exactly what the Bills have been doing. They built a great defense, which I'll give them credit for. They have built a great defense, who are usually top 3 in the league, and they limit a lot of opponents to very few points. And it's very technical and whatnot. But on offense, what do? They just give Josh Allen. They gave Josh Allen the last 2 years Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Dalton Kincaid, and told him to just sling it. Sling it, gave us 30-yard bombs, score tons of points. It'll all work out from there. And if we need a run game, you just run yourself, Josh. And while it can work, it's all fine and dandy. I mean, just look at the Bills past few years. They've been winning the AFC East easily over everyone else. It's clearly working in some capacity. When it comes playoff time and Josh Allen isn't hitting those receivers, it's just not working. And they have no backup plan. They have no backup plan whatsoever. Because obviously with Josh Allen at the helm, if you hit 30-yard bombs every time and put up 50 points a game, you're going to win. But if he's not doing that, if he's missing a receiver for like 3 straight throws and it's 3 straight incompletions, you took all of 20 seconds off the clock? You're punting, you gain no field rate, you gain no yardage. so the field position for the other team is going to get better. The defense had no time to rest what at all. And if the defense can't hold up, well, then you're down a score and you have to rely on Josh Allen even more. So what the Bills are trying to do is get rid of the big weapons like Stephon Diggs, who is also kind of a locker room problem, or at least has been. At least was this last season, kind of was in Minnesota. Get rid of Gabe Davis and just focus on hitting the checkdowns and gaining small yardages, because for whatever reason, sometimes we have too much talent. You just, like, stop thinking, you know? Like the NFL, they just stop thinking. If you don't have as much talent, you kind of have to rely on your brain to figure out how to gain yardage, create new plays, new concepts, good blocking schemes, stuff like that. Like, look at the Patriots and all their Super Bowl wins. What were they mostly? Play defense, run the ball, hit the short checkdowns, gain yardages. We don't have the best weapons here. And if we need to win a game, we rely on Tom Brady to throw guys open, get down the field, kick a field goal, win. I mean, that's how they did it from Super Bowl 1 to Super Bowl 6. Fairly simple, fairly easy stuff. But when they weren't doing that, when they had the guys like when they had Randy Moss in 2007, catching 23 touchdowns, Tom Brady airing it out for 50 touchdowns overall that year, going into the Super Bowl undefeated, their offense stalled when it wasn't quite working. When the Giants only held them to 14 points, they had no answers. They didn't have a backup plan. They didn't have a quick check down, get the ball out, stuff like that. They were too reliant on the big play. They didn't think creatively to get those yards, to find a way to win. And that's what the Bills were doing this past few years. We're just chuck it down to Stephon Diggs, chuck it to Gabe Davis. Let's see if something happens, you know? And they can't do that no more because it's just not working for them. They're not finding the playoff success. And so, what I think the Bills are doing is, and we saw this last year, they're trying to become less Josh Allen reliant by, one, getting a run game. James Cook last year ran for over 1,000 yards, and it really helped their offense. Two, getting rid of receivers like Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, so that the play caller, I can't remember his name, Joe Brady has to come up with new plays, new concepts, figure out how to play better football, smarter football, so that come playoff time, they just hit the checkdowns, gain the first yards, eliminate mistakes, win the game, stuff like that. And the strategy was working for them last year really well. I mean, James Cook rushing for those yards, Josh Allen not having to be asked to do everything, every play, all the time, the entire game. It was working perfectly. I mean, they held Kansas City to 27 points at home. They were running the ball down their throats. They were taking the quick checkdowns. Their only really big mistake was trying to go for a fake punt, which didn't matter ultimately that much, as the Bills did force a fumble later in the game, but still. Their new offense of checkdowns and running was working up until the point where they abandoned it at the 27-yard line, when you had a receiver, when you guys decided to run all the receivers, almost all of them, towards the end zone instead of trying to gain 5 yards, set up 3rd and 4, when you're down only 3 with 1:30 left. Before that, before they've reverted back to the old style of trying to sling it deep to Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, they were actually looking like they were going to win until they abandoned it right at the last moment. But anyways, I digress. This new offense, I think they're going to run it a lot more this year with a lot more consistency. Actually stay committed to it. Check downs, run the ball, ask Josh Allen when needed, but not rely on him. You know? Kind of like Tom Brady of old. Ask him to do the work when needed, but not necessarily rely upon him. Because that is when he performs best, I'd imagine. It's like Patrick Mahomes' last 2 years. He didn't have Tyreek Hill. He had Travis Kelce and a bunch of other guys. And he's won back-to-back Super Bowls because he's learned to play smarter. Just take the check down, Don't force a turnover. You don't have to do everything, but when we need you to do something, you can do it because you're not all tired out from having to do everything else. That's what the Bills are doing. I really like this offensive plan. And even though losing Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis hurts talent-wise, I think overall it will be good for the Bills. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And moving on to my final topic of the day. Tight end for the New York Giants, Darren Waller, has announced his retirement from the NFL at the age of 31. This comes as a bit of a surprise to me as, he is only 31. He's still kind of in his prime. I mean, sure, he's had injuries, but it is a very, very surprising move. There were rumors about it this offseason that he might retire, but it's official now. And I just want to say to Darren Waller, congratulations on your very good NFL career. Your story of overcoming your drug problem and becoming one of the best tight ends in the NFL is truly inspiring. You're an amazing fantasy player. You helped me win my championship back in 2020. Never forget that. Have a wonderful career, wonderful life, man, outside of the NFL. Yeah. Thank you very much. However, I remember last year when I found out that the Las Vegas Raiders were trading Darren Waller to the New York Giants for only a third-round pick. I thought they were absolutely crazy. Darren Waller had been one of the best tight ends up there with Kelsey and Kittle. And they were moving on from him. After moving on from Derek Carr, you're going to move on from one of your best tight ends, give Aiden O'Connell, not get rid of another weapon for Aiden O'Connell? Seriously, Josh McDaniels, you're doing that? Yeah, I didn't like the move. Yet somehow over this year, it's worked out for the Raiders, and I don't know how. Okay, I do know how. But I am very surprised. Although, for one thing, I'm very surprised. But I think the reason this did work is, one, the Raiders weren't going anywhere. So getting rid of a tight end who I guess didn't fit Josh McDaniels' system for a pick is not necessarily a bad thing. Because not only do you get rid of him and, hopefully he does something better over in another career, another place, which sadly he didn't, but you also save a cap hit. You don't have to pay him, all that stuff. But beyond that, the Raiders also drafted Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia, one of the best tight end prospects of all time. So you got rid of Darren Waller, and now you have Brock Bowers. That worked out. Just surprisingly it worked out. Not sure how, but it worked out. So, good on the Raiders for that one. Can't believe Josh McDaniels has done this twice now, and yet somehow it's worked out for the organization. First of all, he trades Jay Cutler, who was a Pro Bowl quarterback, who hadn't had a lot of winning success, but still tons of talent and potential. Moved on from him. And in the Raiders, he moved on from Derek Carr, very similar. A lot of potential, Pro Bowler success, but not a lot of winning. Got rid of him, everyone called him crazy. Yet after that, the team drafts Tim Tebow, which the Raiders had to trade the Broncos had to trade Brandon Marshall for. And the Raiders trade Darren Waller and also select Aiden O'Connell. Now Tim Tebow, by some miracle after Josh McDaniels was fired, becomes good enough to get the Broncos into the playoffs, win a playoff game, and make them look like an appealing organization, while also playing bad enough to make the Broncos not certain about his future. Aiden O'Connell helped the Raiders play well enough to make the Raiders look like an appealing organization and keep Antonio Pierce, while also not making the Raiders entirely sure about his future with them. The Broncos got rid of Brandon Marshall, who went on to not have really any winning success afterward. He did become a Pro Bowler and played great, for a lot of other teams, but he never made the playoffs. The Raiders moved on from Darren Waller, which, like the Brandon Marshall trade, seemed head-scratching at the time, yet somehow worked out for the Raiders, as Darren Waller didn't really do anything with the Giants, and they got a pick. The Broncos ended up attracting Peyton Manning, who led them to a Super Bowl, and the Raiders got Brock Bowers, one of the best tight end prospects of all time. All this is thanks to Josh McDaniels' hubris of trading the starting quarterback and one of the top receiving options. Listen, he's a terrible head coach, and he makes moves that make you scratch your head, yet somehow it has led to success, or at least potential success, for two organizations now. And I just find that rather fascinating. And that'll be all for Roughing the Passer, episode 97. I thank you very much for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you like my content. Hit the bell to stay notified when all uploads are uploaded. With the express written consent of NFL and NFL Productions, hit the like button if you like this video. Share it with your friends and family. And I will see you tomorrow as I give you my U.S. Open predictions. I thank you very much for watching once again, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.